All right, folks, I'm just headed to the office. I guess I have to put it into drive first. Kind of sucks the Insta360 was plugged in, but I guess it was plugged in like file transfer mode, so the battery's dead, even though it's been plugged in the whole weekend. So that's annoying, especially because it's actually not raining right now. But anyway, we will go to Reddit for a topic today. And that's my reminder to you folks that if you want your questions answered, leave them below in the comments. I would much rather answer your comments before going to Reddit. And if you want to have something that's anonymous or add more detail, look for Dev Leader on social media. That's my main YouTube channel. Just passed 10,000 subscribers after 26 months yesterday. Yeah, you can look for that. Or Nick Cosentino on LinkedIn. Send me a message. I will keep you anonymous. Okay, so today's topic is going to be about tech debt. I feel like this is something that I have to talk about regularly. I guess lots of different perspectives on tech debt. This one's a little interesting because I think the person is self-acknowledged, like, I do development, outside of work, and they have this take on tech debt. And the first part of the question seemed like genuinely they were curious, and the second part was maybe they had snarky comments. I didn't read the whole thread, but they kind of didn't edit to it, and they're like, oh, like apparently I ship software that is actually not going to be thrown away, which I thought was kind of interesting. But the way that they framed up how they're looking at tech debt, I think is the really interesting thing here. I think there's a bit of a gap in the terminology or the understanding of it, at least. So when they were talking about tech debt, they're essentially saying hasn't it been proven that basically as soon as you find issues, you fix them immediately? And the example they use in this case is Toyota, the car manufacturer. So they say and I don't actually know if this is true. I think I've heard something like this, but the claim that if Toyota finds any issue, in production or in whatever, they will basically go back and fix it as soon as possible so that they're not rolling out with more issues. And if this is true, I think the idea here is Toyota is, popularly known for having very reliable cars. I think my understanding is both Honda and Toyota do, but Toyota in particular, from what I gather, is supposed to have high quality vehicles. I don't drive a Toyota because I don't like Toyotas. I like my Mercedes. But the interesting thing I think here is that this person's confusing bugs and tech debt. And in some cases, they can be the same or related, right? You might have buggy software because there is a lot of tech debt that has not been addressed. I'm stuck behind a school bus, by the way, so my morning's about to get a lot worse. I'm already late for trying to get to work. I wanted to get there for 8 o'clock. It's 7:40 and it says it's going to be 50 minutes. So that's not happening, which is great. But yeah, you can have situations where there's bugs in software because there has been tech debt that's not been addressed, and then people have a hard time going to clean it up, fix bugs. So it's not like I'm making the statement that these two things are completely unrelated and can never be talked about together, but in terms of how we look at these things, I think that there's something different to look at here. So in the example that was, they're turning right, nice. They're not pulling over. Yes, get out of here. Turn slower next time. In the case of Toyota and looking at, got a red light, perfect. And looking at errors in manufacturing, this is what I would call more like a bug in software. Yes, I would say depending on the severity of the bug, this is something you want to address right away. But again, I'm introducing the concept of severity, and what this person was saying for Toyota, it sounds like, this is just a person on Reddit, but they're they find an issue, they fix it immediately. They didn't mention anything about the severity of the issue, right? But my guess is that the claim is that Toyota will prioritize any type of issue and get the bug or production issue, I don't know if I can call it a bug, addressed straight away. Now, this is tricky in software. And it's tricky for many reasons, because even when we call something a bug in software, the definition isn't always totally clear. Right? You can have behavior that you expect because you designed it a particular way and your system behaves as you expect, and maybe that's not exactly what a user expects. So is it a bug or not? Your code does exactly what you told it to do, which, by the way, code always does exactly what you tell it to do. But you design something to operate a specific way, works for you. Now you have feedback from users. This does not do what I expect. Is it a bug? Right? In my opinion, this is arguably a more important thing to address if users that are. I don't think it's a bug necessarily, not by design at least, but this is something you'll want to address, or else you have unhappy users. You might have other situations where a code path isn't doing what you told it to, or what you intended it to, and no one even uses that feature. They don't even know it exists. Do you go prioritize fixing that? Right? The reality is, when we're trying to compare car manufacturing to software, these are very different things. There's also different implications of that kind of thing when you have a physical product like a car that comes off of an assembly line and software. So I think the analogy is unfortunately just not a very good one, but I can understand where they're trying to come from. So what I'd like to do is briefly talk about maybe the concept of an assembly line and bugs and automated testing. I think that could be an interesting way to look at it, but in terms of tech debt, I think we're talking about different things. So I'll use the second half of this to talk about more specifically around tech debt. I just need a sip of water here as I pull up to this light. Okay, so what I'm making the claim of here is that conceptually, an assembly line for a car manufacturer, or assembly, maybe it's not even directly on the assembly line, it could be other parts of the process. I'm not a car manufacturer, so I don't mean to oversimplify the entire process of creating a car to just the physical assembly line. But I think that set of steps in general is a lot more similar to trying to put software through like a CI/CD, right? So your continuous integration, continuous deployment system. And the reason I say that is because your assembly line in a car manufacturing scenario is a lot more around something being regularly exercised. So that would be like your continuous build system, right? That might be taking code and trying to turn it into the finished product, and then there's going to be automated tests and stuff that run. And if you have quality control checks in your assembly line, again, I'm not a car manufacturer, but I assume that they have these types of things built in at different points in time. This would be like running automated tests, truly. Now, in some situations, an assembly line might be like a better comparison, is like it's kind of finding an issue in a specific car. So not necessarily like the entire model of car is problematic. I'm sure they could find issues like that, but I'm assuming it's more likely to say, hey, this particular vehicle that was being assembled is broken or has an issue, does not pass the quality control. In software, the closest maybe analogy to that is like if you're using the same bits of code, right? So the analogy I'm trying to draw is like if you have a car and the model's being built You'll have different instances of the model coming off of the assembly line. We have to think about everything like object-oriented programming, right? The example with the build system for software is that if the bits were the exact same, you would really hope that your tests, are having the exact same behavior over and over. However, if the bits are different, which is why this kind of is like a bit of a weird analogy, because like the car model, it's going to be the same, it's supposed to be the same each time. If the bits are different for your build, that's like having a different instance of the car coming through the assembly line. If you were to find either issues in a specific car that was being manufactured, like that instance of the car, you would do something about it, right? You're not going to go say, oh, well, let's just ship it anyway, because a customer is going to be paying money for that and they're not going to be happy, right? And the logic is that once you put it in the customer's hands, if they're going, hey, I found an issue, it's going to be a lot more expensive to deal with that down the line. And this is a similar parallel to what we have in software in your build system, where, yeah, if you find an issue during testing, during your automated test runs, you likely, at that point, you likely won't go, oh, let's just ship it, because you know you have a bug. You actually have tests around the scenario. Right? Generally, this is what we would call like a regression. Right? So if you have systems that will do regression testing and they catch an issue, this is generally in software where you would not ship that. So I do see some parallels there, but what I'm talking about specifically is testing and bugs. Now, this person was writing about tech debt, and this is why when I started the conversation, I was saying, I think the analogy when we think about tech debt and this process doesn't really line up the same way. I think you could try and take the example and try to fit it, but I don't think it's necessarily an accurate one, or it's kind of like, there's nothing here, car, why are you beeping? Literally in the fast lane on the highway, person in front of me is like 30 meters ahead. I think you could try to fit the tech debt analogy together there, but I think it's going to be kind of clunky. So let's talk about tech debt. When we have tech debt, the way that I look at this is that you could have either conscious tech debt or unconscious tech debt. And maybe to back up one more step, because depending on the viewer base, I'm sure many of you have heard of tech debt and have experiences or opinions on tech debt. And there's probably some other viewers that are going, okay, like maybe I've heard of this, but I don't exactly know what it is. So I'm going to break it down in those two categories, but at a high level, tech debt is going to be sort of like state of our system that is not ideal, and there's an associated cost with trying to go between two states of a system. That's a very generic way for me to say it. Now, if I go to break it down into conscious and unconscious tech debt, what I will do is try to explain it a little bit more and a little bit more specifically. So if we have conscious tech debt, this is maybe a more popular view of how people have negative experiences with it. But if we have conscious tech debt, this is like a situation where, as a software developer, you're like, I want to go build this perfectly and I'm going to go make it amazing. And then you have your manager is saying, no, we have to ship the software faster. There must be a better way to get it done. And you're like, look, this is the way to do it. And then they go, no, but we have to ship it tomorrow. And you go, okay, there is a corner we could cut and we could, make this, we could do this architectural change, or we could design it this way, but we don't love it. And your manager goes, I don't care, like we can get it shipped tomorrow. And then you go, yeah. And they go, great, do that. And then you're unhappy about it, but you do it. And then you move on, and then it happens again. And then basically you are as a business consciously making these decisions where you are taking what some would argue is the worst of the two, or a worse design decision or technical change. Right? This is just an example, but the idea being that you are consciously making a decision to incur some debt into the code base, something that you will want to fix up later, something that you acknowledge is not ideal. Okay, so hopefully that's a better, more clear definition. And then unconscious tech debt is basically the same thing, except instead of being, I was trying to give you a bit of an exaggerated example, maybe not exaggerated for some people, but my version of unconscious tech debt is that this type of thing actually occurs over time. And even if you believe you're making the best design or best architectural decisions for your code base, because requirements for software do change over time. I've personally, in like however long it's been now, 15 years of building software, I have never seen requirements not change. They're always changing from my experience. And when I say always, I mean in some cases, like, from working in a startup, I've seen requirements change like multiple times in a week. From working at larger companies, I've seen requirements change over longer periods of time, but they're changing and they're evolving. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, by the way, because if you're listening to what your customers want, or the environment around you is changing, and if customers are saying we want something different, or environment says nope, this is how the world works now, if you don't make changes, then what's going to happen is you're going to have unsatisfied customers, or things aren't going to sort of be the way that you expect, because the world around you is also changing. So if you acknowledge that these types of things happen in software development, it means that the way that you architected and designed something to be, air quotes, perfect today is very likely going to have to try and accommodate some different set of requirements later. So just a brief point here that, like, if you're, especially if you're more new to this kind of thing, picking architectures and design approaches that allow you to be flexible in terms of the directions you go, I would, lean towards those types of things, because trying to get it perfect for today does not account for the fact that it's likely going to have different requirements in the future. Having flexibility baked into that is a huge value add, unless you're of the mindset where you're going, well, in the future, if things change enough, we'll just rewrite it anyway, or rewrite the parts of it anyway. That's not necessarily wrong. I err on the side of flexibility. So we have conscious tech debt, where we're making a decision consciously to introduce some debt, and unconscious because things are evolving over time. And if you fast forward a year, 2 years, 5 years from where you're at, the code base that you tried to make perfect has accrued debt because design decisions were made early on, or even if you're trying to adopt new ways forward, you might have a code base that is a mix of patterns. There might be some legacy parts of the code base that they didn't have to get updated at the time. But tech debt will be the existence of code in your code base that generally is going to require extra time and effort to get it up to par, or to get it to a state where you can work with it more effectively. Now, one of the comments that I read right at the top of this Reddit thread, and I'm actually kind of happy that it was right at the top, because when I do these, depending on what, like, sometimes I'll go through and I'm like, I'm going to try to get a whole bunch of comments so I can, when I talk to all of you, I can represent the thread and give you my perspective. And other times, like, I don't know, I don't want to call it like cheating, but I want to be able to talk about it, give you my view, and not have it totally biased by what I read in the Reddit thread. But in this case, I was like, I'll peek at the top one, especially because the person had an edit to their post that made me think like they got flamed right away. Sorry, my wife's messaging me. She's asking me to take off the cat's collar because our one cat, Vito, decided that he was going to figure out how to explore outside because we have a dog door. So we have collars that will beep at them if they get close to the dog door. But I put the cats away instead. So I think she forgot that I was driving to the office early. I need water. Sorry, I got a little distracted there. Now I don't know exactly where I left off, and we're screwed. That's what happens when it's early. I don't have caffeine. So let me just kind of start rambling again if I rewind to my brain. I was trying to mention code base is changing over time. There's going to be cost to getting things to a state that you want to build on top of. The oh yes, the Reddit thread comments. See, I knew it would come back. Thanks for sticking with me. The top comment was around this idea that they're like, you know, I can't remember even the exact words, so I'm not going to do it justice, but they basically were saying like the reason that you even have a job in the first place is like your ability to ship value to customers, essentially. So it was kind of along the lines of like, you know, number one, I felt like they were addressing like not really a good comparison, and as long as people are willing to pay for the value that they're perceiving, then that's what you got, right? So you're not employed to try and I know this is kind of hard for people to hear, but like you're not employed to have perfect code, and you're not employed to have zero tech debt, and you're not employed to have zero bugs that exist in the software. These are all things that we want, right? We want zero bugs in the software. We want zero tech debt. But you're employed because you are helping ship value to customers. Right? From a software engineering perspective, I see this posted on LinkedIn all the time, like you're not paid to code, you're paid to solve problems. And this is, I mean, in my opinion, a reality, right? Like part of your job is that you're writing code. Part of your job is that you're fixing bugs, that you're addressing tech debt, but you're paid because you're helping ship value to customers. Right? That's what customers pay money for. And for some people, they've heard me talk about this before, and they're like, here we go, like, broken record. But I think for some other people, I've had people say in the comments, I haven't thought about it that way before, which is why I am repeating it, and I will keep repeating this in other videos because it's a mindset shift, right? Like as technical people, like I'm sure if you're watching this, if you're a software developer, like you really enjoy writing code. You would want for things to be perfect because you're proud of it. But that's not going to be the reality. Okay, so what do we do about tech debt, right? This is maybe the question. This whole video begs the question, like, well, why are we talking about it in the first place? What are we doing about it? If it's not going to be like Toyota where we find some tech debt and we fix it immediately, what's going on with this? Now, I've also talked about this in other videos, but I figured this would be a good spot to bring it up as well, which is like, as a software developer, you're going to find yourself in a position where, I mean, I shouldn't say guaranteed. I think it's extremely likely in your career, you'll find yourself in a position, likely more than once, where you have identified some part of the code base that you really think should be updated, right? You're looking at it going, man, this is bad code, or I've had to fix bugs in here like 100 times, and like it's really difficult to work in. We can't write tests on this, whatever the reason happens to be. And you're kind of looking at this going, man, like, I really think that this code should get some attention. It either needs to be refactored, or it needs to be, this part needs to be completely rewritten, or this part's dead and we should remove it, like whatever it needs to be. And you're going to have this experience where you think it's a priority. And for those of you that have watched my videos, you might know exactly where this is going, but you'll find yourself in this position where you're going, I think that this is a priority. How do I convince others that we should do this work? We gotta switch lanes over here. Let me in. Let me in. Blue Mercedes. Now, what does it mean when we have to convince others? It means that we have to find effective ways to communicate. And what are effective ways to communicate? Well, being able to explain things to your audience in a way that they're going to understand. To oversimplify it, right? So when we are trying to have conversations about having tech debt addressed, what is insufficient and what you may find gets you into a frustrating position is making statements about the state of the code alone, right? If you have to talk to a person that is less technical, whether that's your manager or a dedicated product owner, and you're saying, look, this code is super messy. It's not my favorite term. It's not clean. It's not clean code. I should just make a rant video about clean code. It drives me absolutely nuts. Clean. Right? You're trying to tell this to your product owner. The code's not clean. We need to go spend time rewriting it. That product owner, by that statement, why should they care about that? Right? The product owner is interested in getting more value shipped to customers. Why? And I don't mean this facetiously. Like, why should the product owner care about how clean that part of the code is, or how coupled it is to something else, or how brittle it is? Like, why should they care about that? Or how much you don't like looking at it because it's hard to read? Why should they care about it? Because stating those things are reasons why you care about it. And this is the difference. When you're trying to get people bought into something and like sell them on the idea of it, say like, hey, this is why we should. What you want to avoid is framing things all about the reasons why you think it's important, or it's important to you, sorry. That's what I mean to say. Because it's not about what's important to you for someone else to make a decision on it. Why should they care about it? So, and I've, like I said, if you've watched my other videos, you'll know where this is going, but we have to just change the framing of it, right? So you take something where you're like, the code is too coupled. And then you go, well, Nick says we should try to see, like, why should the product owner care about this? Okay, well, the code's very coupled, and that means, well, I know the product owner has a handful of features they want us to go build in here. If I go to touch this code that's very coupled to something else, it's potentially likely I'm going to break some other part of the software, which means I have to move a lot slower through there, or we have a higher risk of something else breaking and we might not notice. And also the reason we might not notice until it's too late, say in customers' hands, is because the way the code is written, it doesn't support writing tests very easily, at least automated tests. So really, because of the state of the code, it's coupled, we can't test it in an automated way very easily. So we're going to have to, number one, have a higher risk. Number two, spend more time manually testing it, right? So there is a challenge with time, and there's a risk aspect to it as well. And those might be things that a product owner cares about. And they might say, hey, look, it's only this one feature going in there, and you're telling me the tech debt work is going to take 3 months, and we haven't touched this part of the code in 2 years, and we're just adding one feature. They might go, I don't think it's a priority. It's worth, like, legitimately, it is worth the risk, and it's worth spending a little bit of time extra manual testing on it, and I'm fine with that. And that might be a very acceptable thing based on the trade-off, but at least they have information to try making that decision. Now, it might be very different if they're like, hey, we plan to keep adding more features into this area. So that little 3-month investment might seem like a little 3-month investment now, because we know that over the next 2 years, we plan to keep building in this spot. So yeah, we should go take some opportunity to go invest more time, and maybe even take more than 3 months. You will also find that you'll have more success with addressing tech debt if you're not basically grinding to a halt on delivery of other things. Right? So if, for example, you're telling a product owner, for the next 3 months, we can't ship any features or any fixes or anything else because we're just going to be rewriting and refactoring this code, that's going to be a way harder sell than, hey, we could incrementally approach this. Because at least you're adding more value as you're going still. A lot of people forget that when you have a business, you don't have the luxury of just like turning off adding value. You can absolutely do that in your hobby personal projects. Who cares, right? Like, it's for you. You do whatever the hell you want. And it's not wrong. It's literally your project. You can do whatever you want. If you do run a business selling software or selling software services, you might understand this a lot better, because you'll know that if you said, I'm just going to take the next X number of months to go rewrite something, what's going to happen if you have customers that are like, there's a bug here and I need it fixed, or you have all these customers yelling at you that they want this new feature, right? Are you going to be just like sitting there like, and you might say like, I don't care about getting more users or making more money by adding this feature. I would rather just spend time. And then now you have to justify to yourself, like, I want to address this tech debt. Like, why? Is it actually worth me not adding more customers or keeping more customers on, right? Because you have your churn rate with customers as well. So I feel like there's this element of like, a lot of the time people forget that as software developers, we're working for a business. And that separation causes a lot of frustration, right? Because people are like, why don't the product owners get it? Why doesn't my manager get it? And if you look at it from the other side, like, I've talked to product owners that are like, man, like, I don't understand how the engineers think that I can prioritize this work. Like, I know that they're frustrated by it, but like, what do they expect me to do? I don't understand the code. And it's just because people aren't communicating effectively. That's technically a stop sign. I'm going to keep going, though. There's a school bus, but so it's 4 lanes and a middle turning lane. There's a school bus on the other side with the stop sign out. And there's literally, I'm not making this up, there's probably about 50 plus kids standing outside the school bus there. There are no children on the other side of the road. The guy in front of me went, so I went too. But yeah, I think a lot of the time I see this frustration come up around tech debt because people aren't communicating effectively. Now, anecdotally, I will add in this has been less of an issue or topic at Microsoft in my time here. And I'm not saying that it doesn't exist at Microsoft. I'm just saying at least the teams I've been on, less of an issue. But certainly at the company I was at before, from talking with product owners, I can say that I don't know a single product owner from my time before that would say, oh my God, let's go. That's a red light for you, you dummy. Absolute moron. I don't know a single product owner from my time before that has said that they're against tech debt. Every single one of them that I have talked to has said that they are happy to schedule it. They want to be able to schedule it for the engineers. But the ones that are not doing it, or the ones that are also frustrated because they're like, I don't understand how I'm supposed to prioritize it against other things. So it's a bit of a two-way street, but the engineers need to do a better job of explaining the other side. Because the product owner can explain why we need to go either ship bug fixes or features, but you can't expect them to understand the code. You need to meet them at a point where they can understand why that has value. So I'm just getting to the office here. Like I said, I'm way later than I planned, so I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks so much for watching. Sorry for ranting a little bit, but hopefully that perspective helps in some way. So thanks, and I'll see you next time.